All right, how many do we got here? All right, we're seeing some people come in. I feel like I should say, oh, we're going to start at like 5 after or something every time. Give people a chance to come and join.
Yeah, all good. I think people are shuffling in.
Overall, like not the easiest week or month so far for media buyers is like the word I'm hearing. Performance is down on Meta big time, just anecdotally.
Yeah, I don't think we have any word on exactly why it's happening or confirmation that there is like an algorithm change, but probably more of a behavioral shift that we'll look at the week over week data, but yeah, it was interesting to see pretty much mirrored behavior in the auction across TikTok and Meta, where we just saw CPMs come down, but CTRs also came down across each. On TikTok, I think the CTRs didn't quite decrease as much as the CPMs did. So you actually saw CPCs fall a bit there, while on Meta, CPCs were also climbing. And so, yeah, it's interesting that those two really mirrored each other this week.
It's so hard to tell what is, macroeconomic and what is something happening under the hood, like an algorithm change somewhere. And like, I know we'll touch a bit on this later, but like the major shift from like friend posted Instagram, or not Instagram, but like friend hosted social media, where like the majority of the posts that you see come from your friends, from people you follow, to like algorithm social media. So you think more like TikTok, where it's like you're getting stuff in your feed that the algorithm is like putting in front of you, makes us like somewhat more betrothed to the algorithm, which makes it sometimes less, it's not as easy as it used to be to predict like, oh, there's going to be like a huge influx of happy Easter posts on Sunday, right? And like people are going to be going on, there's going to be people going on and posting that and sharing that, right? It's like it's difficult to assume that that's going to happen. I remember the days when people would be like, oh, well, everybody's going to be on Facebook on Christmas Day posting pictures and stuff, so they're going to be scrolling, so like put a huge spike of ads on Christmas Day, right? And like do it. Whereas now, if you were on TikTok on Christmas Day, I'm not sure if you would necessarily get that same massive influx of like Christmas content, right?
Yeah. Well, I think that's what we, or why we normally see these two don't actually typically see like CPM fluctuations in line with each other, because there's different times when they're sort of crunched for demand, right? Where there's just where demand from advertisers is just far exceeding the supply that the platforms have, and then they start to pump up the CPMs, which, like you mentioned, we'll see especially on during holidays on Instagram. But TikTok is just going to have a much smoother flow of supply. So it's interesting. Yeah, I think because Meta is really was the first mover in terms of a social media platform that really optimized its algorithm, we sort of expect the same behavior, where we're expecting CPMs to spike and ebb and flow the same way elsewhere. But I think it's a really good point you make, Brian, that that other platforms aren't necessarily going to mirror that, because their inventory doesn't fluctuate the same way as Meta's does.
Great stuff, man. All right, I think we've got enough people here, so let's go ahead and get into it. Once again, my name's Brian, here with Tyler. We're back for this week's Media Buyer webinar. What we're going to do this week, same as every week, dive into the data, give you some high-level overviews of what happened month over month, and we have some new data to debut this week. We have week over week data. And what we're going to give you here is a high-level overview of performance that we're seeing across platforms, channels, and specific metrics. Really directionally useful stuff for you. Take this, run with it. But it's all directional. It comes from, the platforms themselves and what we see. So let's get into it. So ROAS change, CPC change, and CPM change month over month. this was a tough month. March was a tough month. Now that we can wrap it, we could talk about it. March was a tough month for performance marketers, and it doesn't really show any sign of stopping, right? CPMs and CPCs and CPMs are up several percentage points across all channels. Whenever you see, 4-5% changes on Meta, that's a huge amount of money. So even though we weight this, still the sheer volume of that to see a 4 or 5% change, it's a big deal, right? People are going to be hurting off of this. CPMs are up, more than 11% on TikTok month over month. TikTok ban who? What? Like, people are definitely buying ad platforms here, right? Or ad placements here, and TikTok's trying to keep up. We'll talk a little bit about TikTok parents company ByteDance launching a new app called Lemonade later on in today's presentation. This week's results don't look super great for Pinterest, but once again, this is a pretty small chunk of budget for most of the brands in this data set. Overall, the movements that I see Pinterest making are good for performance marketers. So this performance doesn't look great, but Pinterest is, as we've been reporting over the last several weeks, making huge changes to their ad platform, their algorithm. They're offering new ad placements. They've just recently doubled down on their creator funds, which a lot of the other platforms have started to dial back. We saw Meta dial back I can't remember exactly what it was called, their version of the creator fund, namely because I think they expected a TikTok ban to go through. And usually these creator funds are designed to attract that next wave of creator to the platform. You see the same thing on YouTube Shorts, right? So it doesn't look great for Pinterest, but I do think this is something where it's still a wait and see moment. I would not be making judgment calls off of the percentage points you're seeing here for Pinterest. Month over month on some of these others, customer acquisition costs is way up on Pinterest again. If you're seeing that, don't worry, don't freak out about that just yet. Conversion rate, delta, CTR delta, and the CAC deltas remain relatively stable across Facebook and Google, Meta and Google. This is the same, a 3% jump here on month over month CAC for Facebook is like pretty high. But that's month over month, right? So if you're having a bad run of time on Meta, you are not alone, right? The industry percent of budget for share across platforms relatively remains the same across month over month. Didn't change too much here now that we were finally able to wrap the full month. But you could see that like certain platforms are pulling away tiny little bits of budget away from, namely Google, right? So TikTok is up a couple percentage points, and so is YouTube. Looking at new customer, so this is different here. This is daily revenue. This is not what we were reporting on last week. This is a change in daily revenue by industry verticals. This is pretty interesting stuff. And of course, the new customer percentage, which is the percentage of customers who were new, and the change in that percent. That's important. So it's not, if I'm looking here, I'm not saying, 1.5% of customers and accessories were new. No, I'm saying the total amount of new customer, that percentage of the total customers has gone up 1.5%. So it's kind of what you would expect to see. Jewelry is still reacting from the Valentine's Day hangover. That's still happening. Sports and fitness is spiking, especially the new customer percentage. Glad to see that people are like, hey, the weather's getting nice. Let's get out there and have some fun. Pet is spiking, as well as baby in daily new revenue and in new customer percentage. It's springtime. A lot of babies are born historically between the months of October and December. So everybody's new baby needs new fashion, right? So we can expect to see seasonality spikes there. And same for your pets. Springtime's the best time to get a pet because the weather's getting nice. You can take your pet outside, right? So keep an eye on that. Is there something for you, if you're not in one of these industries, is there something creative-wise, ad creative-wise that you can leverage there? And of course, Google Ads performance. These deltas did not change too aggressively. Branded search lost a little bit, 7% of its original share. But that was split between Google Shopping Performance Max, which honestly makes sense to me. This is pretty direct. What we're seeing is great performance across Performance Max and Google Shopping. So it makes sense for brands to be experimenting with, let's move some stuff out of branded search, because you're going to cover a lot of that in Performance Max and Shopping anyway, right? Potentially in a way that's a bit more performance focused, right? Like a bit more lower funnel driving conversions. So that's it for data in this week. Let's get straight into discussion. Tyler, I want to talk about some new data that we're offering here, because we've been doing month over month for a while. We're just now starting to get into finally week over week. I had people asking me for this on Twitter last week. Everybody is complaining because their performance is not so great on things like Meta. And they're like, what's going on? Am I alone in this, right? And the answer is no, you're not. But this week over week data is a little bit different from month over month. It's a bit of a shorter runway, right? If you're a brand and you've been looking at this month over month data previously and maybe comparing your old performance against it, using this week over week data, how would you recommend that brands leverage this? As this is going to start appearing in our newsletters going forward, how would you recommend that brands leverage this in a way that makes sense for them?
Yeah, well, I think we're all excited to see this, right, and have a more consistent pulse. The month over month data, I think, is really good for understanding these broader shifts that are happening, right? And I look forward to seeing, okay, when we wrap up the month, what are the biggest things that changed in March compared to April? And that helps you understand the landscape, right? One thing that I reflect on when I look at month over month data is these shifts from channels like Google into more social based channels, and then even within Google out of branded search into like non-brand or shopping, PMAX. That illustrates to me that, as we know, comparing February to March, February is a month with a lot of holidays. March, we're sort of rebuilding the funnel as we move through a lot of promotional moments. And so that kind of illustrates these macro patterns. On a week over week basis, I like this data to help contextualize my performance. We're always discussing, we're always looking for what is the reason why our performance is what it is, right? And that explanation is key to what our decisions and next steps are. If we are seeing decreases in click-through rate, but the rest of our peer set is seeing increases in click-through rate on a given week, then we know it's something that's relatively isolated for us. And we probably have to make changes to our creatives. Maybe we're experiencing fatigue, or maybe there's some change we need to make in our messaging. So to me, these week over week changes are really helpful to just contextualize things, help you understand, is there something you're doing wrong, or is it just a macro factor that is changing either consumer behavior or auction costs? So I think that's the right use case for this week over week data.
So what we're seeing here is, Meta performance is down. It's not going the right direction, so you're not alone there. Over here in the CPM column, I got the colors and the arrows wrong there, but CPMs are up on Meta 5.15% week over week. Yeah. Whereas on TikTok, you could see like our performance is like looking a little better, right? Same at Pinterest, which is like since kind of trying to recover itself over the last week, which tells me once again, they are really pulling levers over there. Things are changing pretty rapidly, which makes sense. They're launching brand new stuff every day, right? Another good week for Microsoft ads, our small budget but trusted companion who's always making good money for us. Google remains relatively flat, but YouTube is definitely having a hard week as well. Looking at some of our micro metrics, there's a bunch here, so I just want to pull out some big winners, or, well, ones worth your attention. The click-through rate on Delta on Facebook and TikTok. That's down bad, right? That's not good. That's, to your point, what you were talking about before we officially got started. It's rare to see these platforms move in conjunction with each other because they operate so differently. If we're looking at our own performance and we're trying to guess what happened here, do you think this is something that's just going to be contained to last week, or do you think this is something we probably need to keep an eye on moving forward?
Yeah, I would say these click-through rate fluctuations and just consumer behavior fluctuations, yeah, on a week by week basis, things like this happen, right? But that's like, this is a statistically significant change, right? We're not talking about like minor percentage point increases. I think when looking through the data, it was something like 85% of brands across both these platforms were seeing CTRs down. So this is pretty much across the board. And so it tells you something's happening there. There's a lot going on in the world. And so it's hard to isolate that to one thing, but sometimes many macro factors combine and they create this destructive interference, right? Where you see a down week, and that just happens. And it's less important to know exactly why than it is to just know that this is a real thing and you're not the only brand that probably saw this decrease. That's how I would look at it.
The same sort of things, I look at click-through rate and conversion rate, and it's so related. The same things happened, on conversion rate on Facebook, on TikTok, on YouTube. It's just down, right? And it's hard to tell. It could be as easy as like something really good was on TV last week, right? And it's something that's kind of sitting on our blind spot that we just can't see because it's happening on such a high level that we're missing it, right? But if you're looking at your own performance and you're seeing that and you're going, well, we beat the standard, I'd be happy. Even if performance is down, and it's not down as far as 7.14%, right? Same's kind of going on over on YouTube's customer acquisition cost, which is kind of through the roof. I know that Shorts is growing. I know that usership on YouTube is huge. I mean, it's one of the world's biggest search engines. But I'm not as impressed by this either. YouTube performance has been so good for so long that I kind of think that this here is like a flash in the pan, and I don't expect these customer acquisition cost increases to continue beyond this week. Let's see. Yeah, let's keep rolling. Do stay tight on time here. Something I definitely want to talk about. Yeah. Well, before we get into this, you're going to see this week over week data in our. You're hearing it here first. You're going to see this in our media buyer index every week going forward. We're constantly improving our process here at Northbeam. This has gotten easier for us to pull, more accurate than ever. We're going to keep bringing this to you. So stay tuned for this, and we'll be getting into this as well. This will probably take priority over our month-over-months in these weekly seminars, because it's just, I know it's Monday, everyone's thinking about the performance from last week. And honestly, here at Northbeam, we do recommend daily tracking, but like weekly level reporting for most brands. So this is coming. Now, discussion. Let's talk a little bit about this, because I don't think everybody knows this is coming yet. So long story short, if you don't know about Lemonade, Lemonade is an American launch of a well-known and long time existing and very popular, like 288 million users, app in China that translates, the name of it translates to Little Red Book. And it's just a lifestyle, sort of life hack centric. Imagine a mashup between kind of Instagram, TikTok, and Pinterest as far as like user interactivity, the way the algorithm works, the way that the content works on it. And ByteDance has launched this in the US. I think it's important to stress, I would not look at this, given how difficult it is to launch something like this into another market. I wouldn't look at this as something reactive based on what's happening with TikTok. I would look at this as ByteDance is crushing it with TikTok. Why would they not emulate an extremely popular app they have in China in the US market, right? So my question for you, Tyler, is it worth it? Because this is a question that's on everybody's mind as a brand. Is it worth it for me to get on here and try and learn this? If I'm a brand and I have something that's lifestyle that fits, should I be spending my time jumping on this app so early and being a first mover, or is there a benefit in a wait and see sort of response?
Yeah, I think so. Just so we're all crystal clear on what happened, clearly ByteDance put a lot of promotion behind this app, right? It had been on the App Store for I think, from what I understand, that originally the app was actually put on the store 2 years ago, and so they made some updates, right? They improved the product, and then they put a bunch of promotion behind it. So I think clearly they know that the pressure's coming and they're looking to diversify their revenue streams, right? So not a big surprise, but yeah, like you said, Brian, this isn't something that happened overnight. It's just somewhere where ByteDance knows that they need to hedge their bets because TikTok's future is a little bit uncertain right now. So if I'm a media buyer, I am at least exploring the platform and I'm understanding it, right? I don't think we're close to red alert on TikTok quite yet, where we're saying, hey, this is a done deal, and where 4% of budgets are up for grabs, right? But it's important to understand how these platforms work, especially if you're a brand that's looking to expand internationally. I think understanding how these different sorts of apps engage users, it just helps understand different consumers and different cultures, how they interact with social media. So I think it's important to learn about what's working about the little red book, because obviously it's gotten a lot of traction in China. But yeah, I think that this is one that is still pretty far from being heavily monetized by ByteDance. It does seem like they are doing some work with monetizing influencers posts right now, not necessarily like ad buying features, but that probably will come. It's more about when than if. But for now, it seems like the strategy that will work on this platform is going to be mostly influencer oriented. Based on your description, Brian, I think brands can understand that this is a platform where social proof matters a lot, right? That sort of credibility and authenticity. So yeah, I think my best recommendation would be test it out as a user, right? Just so you have an understanding for it, but not something that's necessarily going to be a disruptor anytime in the next few months, I wouldn't say.
You talked about something that really resonated with me, and it's, in my experience, I see this so often with brands. And so we get really laser focused on the ads, and we're making ads and we're publishing them and we're figuring out ways to create thousands of different hooks and all of these things, and you produce them, like a machine. But so often the people making and running these ads are not serious users of the platform themselves, where these ads are going to appear in context. And historically, I feel like the best ads I've ever seen were very clearly made by people who have a deep, deep, deep understanding of the platform as a user, and understanding of, I know exactly how this ad is going to be perceived by these users, how it's going to appear in the feed, how people are going to react to it, because I am a user myself. So that's kind of what you're alluding to?
100%. Yeah. And I think we're making more of a macro point now that applies to all platforms, but especially if you're trying to crack a new channel, right? We all have a basic understanding for how Facebook and Instagram work, right? But if you're trying to expand into a channel like YouTube or TikTok or Pinterest, you have to understand how those users work. Reddit is another really good example. We don't really talk a lot about Reddit, but you can have success on these channels if you really understand how their communities work, how people engage with content, and you build something that's really tailored to them and that will pass their bullshit detector, right? So I think that's super underrated. A lot of times we feel like we can just repurpose content, and surely that's efficient, but there's a pretty thin line between one of these expanding channels actually working for you and hitting an efficient number for you to keep it on, and it completely falling flat on its face. And usually content's the difference.
Absolutely. Let's talk about the final things here, final thoughts. Let's talk about Google Analytics. So
yeah.
First of all, we're going to touch on this in great detail over the coming months, because if you haven't already switched over to GA4, Universal Analytics is going to turn off on July 1. So for everybody here who's here today, if you haven't already moved on, if you're still using Google's Universal Analytics, definitely consider switching now. It's way easier to start now than it is to be forced, in the moment. In the lead up to that, Google Analytics is getting rid of some of these attribution models. So some of these that they announced this last week, they're getting rid of first click, linear, time to came, position based. There's a lot of people out there who are still doing their ad attribution off of Google Analytics UTM setups, right? What does this change? Removing these, I think, if not the most accurate, at least some of the most recognizable attribution models. What does this do for marketers who are trying to run their ad campaigns out of Google Analytics? What does this change for them?
Yeah, well, notably absent from this list is Last Touch, right? And that's no surprise. I think that's the model that's going to look best for Google-based channels. And so this, to me, this is a strategic change by Google to promote their new data-driven attribution, right? Where we're going to be migrating to this black box world where things are a little bit messier and a little less transparent. And this is just one step in preparing advertisers for that. Though again, they weren't going to get rid of last click because I think that's what most advertisers using GA are still using. But yeah, I think it's definitely another knock at being able to leverage GA for brands that were still using it to understand prospecting campaigns, right? Or non, any channel that's not going to really perform well on a last click basis. It's another knock, and it makes the platform a little bit more difficult to use for those purposes. So yeah, I would say for brands that we're still using any of these models, it's time to, it's really just a wake up call and notice that things are changing and they're going to change pretty quickly.
We are going to cover Google Analytics in great detail over the coming weeks. Our team's put together a big presentation on the major differences between the old Universal Analytics and GA4. We're going to be covering how you as a marketer can adjust, find value in this, and also how Northbeam fits into this whole world, because that's something we haven't even touched on here. But yeah, that's about it. Any final thoughts for media buyers going into this week? I personally still want to lean on the same thing we've been harping on for a while, where right now is a great time to refresh your creative. I mean, I think we're both in New York right now. The weather's fantastic. This is a great time to get your creators, your influencers, your content team back outside and ride that wave of sunshine, frankly. So that's my thing this week, is I would be focusing not just on refreshing your creative and changing it up, but shooting net new stuff.
100%. Transition seasons are when consumer behaviors change, right? It's time to get those ads that you've been super reliant on, right? That are slowly fatiguing and dragging down your account with it. Time to try to maybe even make that step that we're always uncomfortable taking, which is pause it for a day, right? Let your winners from your test campaign take control for a day, see how that works, right? These are the times when you need to do a little spring cleaning in your ad account and shake things up. So totally agree, Brian.
And that's it for us today on today's Media Buyer. See us here next week, same time, same place. If you have any questions, tweet them at us at Northbeam on Twitter. DM them to us on LinkedIn. Shoot your customer support teams a message. We're here to support you. And we're here to provide whatever you're looking to see, whatever's going to be actionable for everybody in this call. If you know anybody still using Google Analytics for their ad attribution, send them this recording. We'll post it on YouTube right after this, and hopefully you can help change their mind. Once again, it was a pleasure hanging out with all of you. Tyler, thanks for joining me today. And we will see you all next week.
Thanks, everyone.